of June, at a time when the heat was building, gathering in the asphalt, reflecting off the glass, until it reached a peak that wouldn't release long into September. I was going east, unlike so many of the students from my class at Whitman College who were headed west, toward Seattle and San Francisco, sometimes Hong Kong. The truth was, I wasn't going east to the place I had originally hoped, which was Cambridge, or New Haven, or even Williamstown. But when the emails came from the department chairs saying they were very sorry, a competitive applicant pool, best of luck in your future endeavors, I was grateful that one application had yielded a positive result: the Summer Associates program at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. A favor, I knew, to my emeritus advisor, Richard Lingraff, who had once been something of an Ivy League luminary before the East Coast weather, or was it a questionable happening at his alma mater, had chased him west. They called it an associate's program, but it was an internship with a meager stipend. It didn't matter to me. I would have worked 2 jobs and paid them to be there. It was, after all, the Met, the kind of prestigious imprimatur someone like me, a hick from an unknown school, needed. Well, Whitman wasn't entirely unknown, but because I had grown up in Walla Walla, the dusty, single-story town in southeastern Washington where Whitman was located, I rarely encountered anyone from out of the state who knew of its existence. My whole childhood had been the college, an experience that had slowly dulled much of its magic. Where other students arrived on campus excited to start their adult lives anew, I was afforded no such clean slate. This was because both of my parents worked for Whitman. My mother, in dining services, where she planned menus and theme nights for the first-year students who lived in the residence halls. Basque, Ethiopian, Asado. If I had lived on campus, she might have planned my meals too, but the financial waiver Whitman granted employees only extended to tuition, and so I lived at home. My father, however, had been a linguist, although not one on faculty. An autodidact who borrowed books from Whitman's Penrose Library. He taught me the difference between the 6 Latin cases and how to parse rural Italian dialects, all in between his facilities shifts at the college. That is, before he was buried next to my grandparents the summer before my senior year, behind the Lutheran church at the edge of town, the victim of a hit and run. He never told me where his love of languages had come from, just that he was grateful I shared it. "Your dad would be so proud, Anne," Paula said. It was the end of my shift at the restaurant where I worked, and where Paula, the hostess, had hired me almost a decade earlier, at the age of 15. The space was deep and narrow, with a tarnished tin ceiling, and we had left the front door open, hoping the fresh air would thin out the remaining dinner smells. Every now and then, a car would crawl down the wide street outside, its headlights cutting the darkness. "Thanks, Paula." I counted out my tips on the counter, trying my best to ignore the arching red welts that were blooming on my forearm. The dinner rush, busier than usual due to Whitman's graduation, had forced me to stack plates, hot from the salamander, directly onto my arm. The walk from the kitchen to the dining room was just long enough that the ceramic burned with every trip. "You know, you can always come back," said John, the bartender, who released the tap handle and passed me a shifter. We were only allowed 1 beer per shift, but the rule was rarely followed. I pressed out my last dollar bill and folded the money into my back pocket. I know, but I didn't want to come back. My father, so inexplicably and suddenly gone, haunted every block of sidewalk that framed downtown, even the browning patch of grass in front of the restaurant. The escapes I had relied on, books and research, no longer took me far enough away. "Even if it's fall and we don't need the staff," John continued, "we'll still hire you." I tried to tamp down the panic I felt at the prospect of being back in Walla Walla come fall, when I heard Paula say behind me, "We're closed." I looked over my shoulder to the front door where a gaggle of girls had gathered, some reading the menu in the vestibule, others having